What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. For today's video, I'm going to be doing an Eastern Conference standing predictions. I'm going to start from the very bottom, build my way up, and I will say there's going to be some really hot takes and some teams that a lot of people will disagree with. I'm going to give you my reasoning for each team, but you can always let me know in the comment section why you disagree with me. I'm going to go through some of these teams. It's going to be fun. I'm just doing the Eastern Conference for today's video. I'm not sure how well this video is going to do, or even if you guys want a Western Conference standings prediction, you can always let me know in the comment section as well. Also, guys, if you want to hit the like button, that would be very much appreciated. Let's try to get this video to 100 likes. And if you would like to hit the subscribe button as well, I would really appreciate that as well. I'm also doing it free. Again, it's completely free Yahoo Fantasy Draft auction style tomorrow, October 18th, 2:45 Pacific, 5:45 Eastern Time. There is only one spot remaining. I will link it in the comment section if you want to join. But with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shoutouts on my channel. And for today's video, the shoutout goes out to Logical Raptors Fanatic. Logical Raptors Fanatic, thank you so much for supporting this video through your likes and comments. It is very, very much appreciated. Now, let's start with the bottom of the Eastern Conference, which is the Orlando Magic. Now, year after year, they do get a lot of players, but whatever the reason being, they just don't seem to get past that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. I know they had Nikola Vucevic several years ago when the Raptors won the championship, where they were at the 7th place. But after that, it just seems like they're developing talent, but not really going anywhere as a team as a whole. There's a lot of raw talent there. I really do hope they develop some of their talent. They're building a very interesting roster of these really tall, switchable defenders. Again, hopefully they do a little bit better, but I have them at the 15th spot in the Eastern Conference. Moving on to the 14th spot, I have the Indiana Pacers. Now, the Indiana Pacers are a young, exciting team. They actually have some really nice pieces in Tyrese Halliburton. I like Miles Turner. I like Buddy Hield there, but those two players are very likely to be moved. And they have some really good young players who I particularly really admire in Jalen Smith, who I think is going to absolutely take a huge step once. And if Miles Turner does get moved, he finally will get that bigger role. I think he's a good player who can rebound. He can shoot the three. He can block shots as well. So he'd be a really nice replacement for Miles Turner. And also, I really do like the young Canadian kid you guys have drafted at Benedict Mathurin. He's looked absolutely amazing in the preseason so far. So I like what the Indiana Pacers are building. They're still a very young team. They're definitely going to be tanking for Victor Wembanyama. So let's see what happens. But I have them at the 14th spot. And moving on to the 13th spot, I have the Charlotte Hornets. Now, Charlotte Hornets are really interesting roster. They have LaMelo Ball. They don't have much outside of him. I mean, I know they have Terry Rozier, but they're starting center. I mean, is it supposed to be Mason Plumlee who's going to take them to the promised land? Not necessarily, guys. I think they really need to move some of these guys away and trade them for draft capital. James Bouknight was supposed to be that player, but I don't know if this is true. I saw online that he got arrested. So just a lot of off-court issues with the Charlotte Hornets. And if, hopefully not, he doesn't, but if LaMelo Ball does get injured, this team isn't really going anywhere. Even with him, I really doubt they're going to do much this year. They obviously lost their second leading scorer. We know what happened there. Not going to go into the details of that, but I don't see them finishing higher than 13. I'd be surprised if they finish 13, to be honest. They very well could finish 14th and 15. And moving on to our next team here, we have the Washington Wizards. Again, Washington Wizards, much like some of these other teams, they seem to be stuck in the middle of nowhere, and not because of lack of talent. They have Bradley Beal, and that's about it. I know they have Kristaps Porzingis, who performed really well. They do have a player I really like in Danny Avdija, but it just seems like he's not progressing at all for whatever reason. I don't know if he needs more minutes, more shots, but even someone like a Rui Hachimura, these guys really need to take the next step to help Bradley Beal, who clearly wants to stay with the Washington Wizards, and the Washington Wizards are content with what they have, but it just seems like they're stuck in a weird position where they're not bad enough to get the #1 pick, but they're also not good enough to make the playoffs. So I think they really need to decide what's going on with this roster, but I have them at the 12th spot. Moving on to the 11th spot here, I have the New York Knicks. Now, this may surprise a lot of people. They potentially could be at the 10th spot. I wouldn't doubt that. I actually am not big on the New York Knicks because Julius Randle, it seems like whenever he got that big bag, he's just kind of settled in. He's not shooting very well for someone his size. I believe he shot in the low 40s%, and it just seems like he's kind of trying a little bit too hard to force his game. They do have Jalen Brunson, who was let's be honest. He is a pretty good acquisition, but he's not going to take him over the hump. He's probably going to be a really good facilitator and someone who can score points for them, but him, RJ Barrett are going to be the two guys that are going to be the main two guys. Julius Randle is kind of just in that place where he's taking minutes away from Obi Toppin, and he's not really helping the team because he creates a little bit of chemistry issues, but also because he doesn't provide a lot of floor spacing as well. So I have the New York Knicks finishing in the 11th spot. In the 10th spot, I have the Detroit Pistons. Now, this may be a little bit of a hot take. I'm actually a lot higher on the Detroit Pistons than a lot of people are. And this is not just because of Cade Cunningham. This is not because they drafted Jaden Ivey or Jalen Duren. This is actually because I really like Sadiq Bey. I'm actually taking him and one of my players to become the most improved player. I think he's going to take the next step. The only thing with him is he needs to shoot the ball a little bit better from the field. He's a good two-way player, but shooting in the low 40s for someone who's listed at 6'8" is just not good enough. He's a good three-point shooter, needs to improve his game a little bit more. And obviously, besides that, they got Bojan Bogdanovic, who is going to be a solid addition. I don't know if they're going to be starting him or using him off the bench, but they really do have a really nice roster. I expect Cade Cunningham to be a lot better than he was last season, hopefully a lot healthier, but I have the Detroit Pistons finishing in the play-in. Now, this is our very first hot take of the standing predictions. I have the Chicago Bulls at the 9th position. Now, I have this because Lonzo Ball was such a big part of this team's early season success last year. I know you could point to DeMar DeRozan, but not having Lonzo Ball pretty much this entire year, you really have to question how this team's going to do. And the fact that Zach LaVine got paid. I'm not saying he's going to regress a lot, but usually NBA players we know play a lot better in their contract seasons. They're looking for that bag. Also, DeMar DeRozan is a year older. I know they're going to get Alex Caruso back, but unless Pat Williams really breaks out, I know Chicago Bulls have been waiting for quite some time for him to really take that next step. And I unfortunately don't think he can do that with DeMar and Zach being there. I just don't see them being there because they're not a great defensive team. Zach and those two guys that are scoring, DeMar, aren't exactly really good defenders. Neither is Andre Drummond, who they acquired. So again, we'll see what happens with him. And also Nikola Vucevic as well, who's a year older and his defense isn't great. So I think ultimately their downfall will be their defense, not so much their offense. They're still a decent offensive team. So we'll see what happens. I have them finishing at the 9th spot. And we have another team, guys. I got to say the top 8 teams, it is absolutely so frustrating because I don't want to put any of these teams at the 7th, 8th spot. Atlanta Hawks any other season would easily be a top 6, top 5 team in the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference is just so stacked this year. And although there were questions about Trae Young and if he could carry the Atlanta Hawks, they got a huge helping player in the backcourt to help his defense, and that is DeJounte Murray. Now, I do believe DeJounte Murray is going to be a big factor in helping Atlanta become a much better defensive team. Jalen Johnson has looked great in the preseason thus far, but you really have to question guys like Clint Capella, who's been very injury prone. They need a center. I know they technically can insert Onyeka Okongwu into the starting position, but I really think they need to move off someone like a Clint Capella, who's a good rebounder, good shot blocker, but it just seems like he hasn't really played all that much ever since he's been with the Atlanta Hawks. Just a lot of injury issues. And again, it's frustrating putting the Atlanta Hawks there because I really do like what they're building there. But outside of Trae Young, outside of DeJounte Murray, you have John Collins there. We don't know what his role is going to be. He's obviously wasn't happy being the 3rd, 4th option or whatever he was. And now you insert DeJounte Murray in there. That's going to push him a step back. And also just getting rid of Kevin Huerter. I know they got a 1st-round pick for him, but he was a really good role player for them as well. So again, we'll see what happens, but I have him finishing at the 8th spot. Now, this is going to be one of the hottest takes of the standing predictions. That is the Miami Heat at the 7th spot. I absolutely disgusted the fact that I had to put them so low, but I have good reasoning before everyone dislikes this video and goes angry at me in the comment section. Miami Heat, the reason I have them at the 7th spot, they lost PJ Tucker, Jimmy Butler, and Kyle Lowry are going to be 30, or well, Jimmy Butler's already 33 years old. Kyle Lowry is going to be 36 years old. Now, I know people are going to point to Chris Paul, but another issue with the Miami Heat is Chris Paul is different because he also misses a lot of games, but so does Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, the last time these two players played over 65 games was 5+ seasons ago. These guys have missed a ton of games, whether that's due to injury. Last year's Kyle Lowry due to personal reasons. And I know they have Tyler Hero, who they could be starting. I don't know what they're going to do with him. They had him coming off the bench. But the big question with Miami Heat isn't going to be their defense. Their defense has always been amazing. Is where are the point production going to come from? I know Jimmy and Kyle Lowry will play some games, but outside of those two guys and maybe Tyler Hero, who's going to easily put up 20, 22 points, where's the other production coming from? Bam Adebayo does not get enough criticism for his lack of shooting. Everyone talks about Ben Simmons, and I know Ben Simmons is listed as a point guard, which is why he gets that flake about not shooting. Bam Adebayo has yet to improve his shooting at all. And Max Strus, as much as he looked like a solid role player last season, I can't see him averaging more than 14, 15 points. And same with Bam Adebayo. So where's that offense coming from outside of Tyler, Jimmy, and Kyle Lowry. And before people say Victor Oladipo, he just has been one of those players we've continuously been waiting for to finally get back to his former self. And the reality is he's never going to, whether that's injuries, whatever it is, he's just not that same player anymore. So again, you really have to question where the offense is going to come from for the Miami Heat. There's going to be a lot of questions. Duncan Robinson was benched for the second half of the season. So that is another question. So unless they make a big trade, I just don't know how the Miami Heat are going to be a top 3, 4, 5 seed even, because they just lack a lot of offense. Their defense is going to be solid. I like Eric Spoelstra, but I just have him listed here for several reasons. They didn't do anything to really improve this offseason. PJ Tucker is one of the biggest losses of any Eastern Conference team. He was such a huge anchor to their defense, but we'll see what happens. I have him listed at the 7th spot. And moving on to the 6th spot. Now, this is where I think Brooklyn Nets should be placed. Now, I really like the acquisition of Ben Simmons. I know people are going to say all sorts of questions about his shooting, his mentality, his willingness to actually play games. Guys, Ben Simmons is exactly what the Brooklyn Nets needed. They needed a passer, they needed a defender, and that's exactly what they get. And he also has a lot of size. He's 6'9", 6'10", whatever he's listed at. That's amazing. They can play him at the center position. Nicholas Claxton is a young center who I expect should get a lot better. And then taking into consideration Kyrie Irving should be playing a lot more games this season than he did last season because of the COVID vaccine rules they had in place. So I expect Kyrie Irving and KD to really try to carry this team. And Ben Simmons is going to be a good facilitator. He's got shooters around him in Seth Curry, Joe Harris. Kyrie, KD can obviously shoot as well. So the only questions I have around this is head coach Steve Nash, but even some of the chemistry issues is the only thing. So same with some of the reasons I highlighted on the Miami Heat. In terms of injury issues, Kyrie misses a lot of games. KD is definitely going to load manage, and Ben Simmons is going to as well. He hasn't played in one full season, so we'll see what happens with that roster. I think they could potentially be higher and surprise a lot of people, but due to their off-court issues and just a lot of chemistry issues, I have them in the 6th place. Now, I said the Miami Heat are going to be the hottest take of these predictions. I lied, guys. I actually have the Boston Celtics at the 5th spot. Now, again, before people go raging on me in the comment section, hear me out. Ime Udoka was such a huge part of the Boston Celtics team's success. They were 7th the previous season. I know they had COVID protocols, all of that stuff going on, but also because the reason wasn't that the Boston Celtics, were a bad offensive team. What really accelerated them from going from 7th to that 2nd place team was their defense, and Ime Udoka was a huge part of that. They're one of the best defensive teams last year, and I think losing him is going to hurt them a lot. Now, I know obviously people are going to point to guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to definitely get a lot better, but there's also another issue with the Boston Celtics, and that is losing Robert Williams, who's expected to miss, I believe, about 6 to 8 weeks to start the season. And I say this because he is a great defensive player, but also because the Boston Celtics, the last 2 seasons without him are 11-10, and the previous season they were 7-13. He is a huge, huge loss to the Boston Celtics, and those the first 2 months are really going to affect the Boston Celtics defense, because the defense always anchors, or I should say the center always anchors the defense on a team, and I think losing Robert Williams is going to be huge. I know people are going to point to Malcolm Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon has his injury issues as well, and obviously they do have Marcus Smart, who's a good defender, but losing that center that really blocks a lot of shots like Robert Williams is going to hurt them. And same thing with Al Horford. He's getting a year older. He can play obviously the center position, but you really have to question how much does he have left in the tank. So again, I have the Boston Celtics there for several reasons. I think losing Robert Williams for the first 2 months and even having to load manage him throughout the season, and for a center that young to be having knee issues, guys, I don't know. I don't see him playing more than 50, 60 games, and that's me being completely generous. So we'll see what happens. I think him losing out on the first 2 months is going to affect the Boston Celtics defense greatly, but we'll see what happens. Let's move on to our 4th spot here. And now I actually have the Cleveland Cavaliers higher than maybe a lot of people do. The reason being is Jared Allen. I know everyone points to the Donovan Mitchell acquisition. There's obviously a lot of questions surrounding the backcourt being so tiny, and Isaac Okoro is listed at 6'4", who's going to be potentially their small forward. So their 1, 2, and 3 are really undersized. Let's be completely honest. But what really helps their defense is Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. I expect Evan Mobley to take a huge leap next season as well. He's going to be a lot better. I just hope Donovan Mitchell doesn't get in the way of his production. He's a solid, young, humble player, and I really do hope he progresses. But Jared Allen just completely changes the outlook of this team. This team was top 3 or 4, I believe, before Jared Allen went down with that injury. They were one of the best defensive teams in the entire NBA, and we saw what happened. As soon as he went down with injuries As soon as they had those injuries, the Cavaliers dropped in standing. So Jared Allen being healthy is going to be key for them, but they really were missing a lot more offense. Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell will be great in the regular season. I can't really comment on the playoffs as of yet because I think that does hurt them a little bit. But I have the Cleveland Cavaliers at the fourth. I think they're going to have a really good season. Now, I know a lot of non-Raptors fans watching this video are absolutely going to hate me for this and going to call me a homer. I have the Toronto Raptors at the third spot in the Eastern Conference. The reason being is one of the reasons is a few other channels like Pansari Basketball and Gups Soundclink have touched upon this is not only chemistry, but continuity is such an underrated aspect of the NBA. The reason I have the Raptors finishing this high is because one of the biggest issues with the Raptors last season was their bench. Their bench was pretty much unplayable. All the bench players, let's be completely honest, they were terrible. They sucked. They weren't guys that should have been bench players. There should have been 11, 12, 13 guys off of the bench, but the Raptors had no option. But in terms of the bench this season, they have Otto Porter Jr., who they bought in. They bought in Thaddeus Young at the NBA trade deadline last season. Chris Boucher looks a lot better. Precious Achiuwa looks like he'll be a finalist candidate for MIP. So they have 4 guys they can use off of the bench. And that's not to mention some of the other players that could potentially develop into key role players as well, like Delano Banton. So we'll see what happens. I want to quickly mention continuity, guys, because when we talk about the Raptors championship, everyone talks about Kawhi Leonard. But one of the key part of them winning that series against Milwaukee Bucks and even against Golden State Warriors, of course, was Kawhi Leonard. We know Pascal was great. We know Kyle Lowry was great. But also we had guys like Fred VanVleet, Norman Powell go off. They were key role players. And the reason they performed as well as they did were because they were with this team for several years before they acquired Kawhi Leonard. So those role players play a great role. And I think having guys like Scotty Barnes, obviously him getting better as well, but just having some guys that have been there for some time, that chemistry is a huge part of the Raptors season success. So I expect them to be the third spot. I know not everyone will see that way. And I'm not just saying that because they're my team and you see all of this background here. I truly feel like the Raptors are going to be a solid team next year. Now, moving on to the second spot, this team you could argue could be the first team in the Eastern Conference. I have Milwaukee Bucks at the second spot. The reason being is because Milwaukee dealt with that injury we saw last playoffs with Chris Middleton missing some time. And although they have emphasized a lot more rest for guys like Giannis, I think Milwaukee Bucks are going to be one of those teams that doesn't focus necessarily on regular season standings. They're going to be a team that wants to rest their 3 guys in Jrue Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Giannis for the playoffs. That is their ultimate goal, is to win a championship, not to be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. So I think they're going to rest those guys a lot more to have them ready for the playoffs, which is why I have them finishing second. And also the reason I have them finishing second, because the first team I have predicted in the Eastern Conference will be the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, before people jump at me saying there's a lot better teams, there definitely are. But the reason I believe the 76ers will finish first and not the Milwaukee Bucks is because you look at teams over the years. There's been certain teams that feel like they really need to prove it to the NBA. That's going to be the 76ers. Joel Embiid is frustrated that he didn't win the MVP. He's going to prove it through the regular season. James Harden, who has a terrible, I shouldn't say terrible last season, but he didn't definitely live up to the expectations that were expected of him last season. And definitely he's coming back. He's put in a lot of work in the offseason. You can see that. And also I want to point to their starting lineup as well, guys. They have Tobias Harris. They have Tyrese Maxey, aside from James Harden and Joel Embiid. They have 4 guys in their starting lineup that can give you 20 plus points. That makes them a really dangerous team. I expect Tyrese Maxey to get a lot better. I also expect the bench to be a lot better. Montrezl Harrell is a really under the radar signing for the 76ers. I know his defense isn't the greatest, but in terms of just regular season success, I think he's going to contribute huge. He's one of those guys that can come in off of the bench in limited minutes, provide some really quality minutes, and provide a lot of scoring, which I think makes the 76ers such a dangerous team on the offensive side. And one more factor I do want to point in before we talk about other players is PJ Tucker. Every one of the teams that PJ Tucker has been on the last few seasons, Milwaukee Bucks, Miami Heat have been a top team. He is such an underrated player, role player in the NBA where he can hit 3-pointers. He's a great defensive anchor. He's going to make the Philadelphia 76ers team that much better. And also the acquisition of someone like a DeAnthony Melton from the Memphis Grizzlies is going to be great for their roster as well. So again, they have a really good, interesting roster of their starting 5. They also have some really good bench pieces. They're a lot deeper. I really do like Paul Reed on there. I wish Doc Rivers would give him a little bit more minutes, but we'll see what happens with the Eastern Conference. These are my standings, guys. Again, I know it's hard to really have the 76ers up there. Obviously, the Raptors and the 76ers have that rivalry, but I want to be completely honest, give you truthful explanations on my predictions. But I want to hear it from you guys. Do you agree with some of these standings? I know I'm going to get a lot of flake in the Eastern Conference predictions because people are going to say you have the Boston Celtics, Miami Heat far too low, and you're being a homer on the Toronto Raptors. But those were my reasonings. I do want to hear from you guys. Do you agree with this? Do you disagree? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, guys, I do have a trivia question for you today. And that trivia question is, which NBA player averaged the most points per game in the preseason? Is it A, Jalen Green? Is it B, John Morant? Is it C, Tyler Hero? Or is it D, Jalen Brown? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video, guys. So thank you so much for watching this video. And I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.